Joining me now, Judge, how you doing today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for joining me. So, what are your thoughts on that? Why bring in that witness?
Well, when you're trying to either prosecute and or defend the case, just generally speaking, you want to bring in as many witnesses who can really paint the picture of not only a specific incident, but also maybe the overall character of the case that we're dealing with. So in these cases, you're going to see as many witnesses as they can bring so that they can actually paint the picture as to what they're trying to prove, whether it's a defense perspective or prosecutor's perspective. So you're going to get a lot of witnesses. And sometimes the testimony may seem like it's not relevant or it's not as important, but every bit of information will determine how that jury comes back with their verdict.
All right, and LA County Deputy Public Defender Philip Dube. Philip, thanks so much for joining us. What are your thoughts on that witness?
Well, the prosecution, first of all, has to establish a timeline of when Kathy disappeared. The heart of the case is that the missing wife, who they presume to be deceased, provides the motive for the death of Susan Berman. So if that's the case, they have to take everybody back in time to introduce the jury to all the witnesses who last saw Kathy Durst alive. So they're bringing in all these witnesses, whoever they have from back then, which, by the way, is kind of unbelievable when you consider it was 40 years ago, give or take. Additionally, they want to attack Bob Durst's alibi that he's giving. Apparently, he's saying he was with certain people, he was with the neighbors, he dropped her off at the train station, then he went to go have drinks with the neighbors. They're bringing in all these so-called alibi witnesses to discredit all the statements that he gave to the police. So again, this is a process of accretion. In other words, they're just like little baby building blocks to get to the heart of the Susan Berman murder, and we're still in that embryonic stage, even though it seems like it's been an eternity.
I mean, Judge, this is a very unique case, but this case is about the murder of Susan Berman, but we keep hearing so much about Kathy Durst. What's the strategy there? Is this case about Susan Berman, or does the prosecution have to really prove first that Durst killed Kathy Durst?
Well, it doesn't hurt to prove that he did the first murder, because obviously that's going to paint the picture of him as being someone who will kill at will. And I find it really interesting, just as it was said, the fact that these are incidents that happened so long ago, you really wonder the memory of all the witnesses who are telling, whether or not he was with them or where he was or the conversations. So that's a challenge in and of itself for the prosecutor to actually make these witnesses believable, considering that they've had this information or tried to retain this information for so many years. But yes, I think that by mentioning Durst, it continues to paint the picture that this is a murderer, basically, and that he had to commit these other crimes also.
And Philip, I mean, what do you make of the defense's strategy so far in the case? Does it feel like it's coming together?
Well, there's an old expression in criminal defense, and that is the devil is in the details. Okay. The goal, obviously, is to attack these witnesses as to various details and to try to make them unbelievable, incredible. First of all, that they're biased, that they've probably had some type of conversations with the prosecution and denied any interviews then with the defense. So it looks like it's not a fair fight. It's almost like a David and Goliath type fight. And juries tend to be sympathetic with people who are put in a position to have to defend from acts that occurred decades ago. So the witnesses that they're putting on better get their ducks in a row. Otherwise, juries might take unkindly to their theory.
All right. Well, let's just switch gears for a moment because we've been following the case, the trial out in Iowa. It's in the murder case of 20-year-old Molly Tibbetts. The defendant, Christian Bahena Rivera, stands accused of stabbing Tibbetts to death and placing her body in a cornfield. Yesterday, the jury deliberated for roughly 3 hours before going home for the night. Deliberation resumed this morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. And for the jury makeup, we don't know who the alternates are just yet, but we do know, barring any issue that would require an alternate to come back to the jury, it consists of 3 Hispanics and 9 white jurors. Ages range from 19 to 71, with 5 female and 7 males making up the jury of 12. The prosecution says Bahena Rivera is Tibbetts' murderer. They point to his confession and the fact that he led authorities to her body. But the defense is saying the opposite. They say that the wrong guy has been arrested for for this crime. The defense points to the lack of looking at other suspects, including sex offender Ron Pexa and Tibbetts' own boyfriend, Dalton Jack. We'll bring you inside the Iowa courtroom as soon as we have word on the verdict. But in the meantime, let's take a listen to yesterday's closing arguments.
With him